Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about The Lost Boys. Anyone who doesn't know, which if you don't know, that's rare. I am obsessed with The Lost Boys. It is my favorite movie of all time. I have seen it 17 times. Yes, I am keeping track. And today I'm going to be talking about 20 fun facts involving the movie. Some of these facts I knew, some of these facts I didn't know. So it's, we all get to learn together and have a really good time talking about a movie that is amazing. It's perfect. Santa Carla doesn't exist. The city made up for the movie is based on Santa Cruz. They really changed the name there. Specifically the beginning, but throughout the movie, there are shots of the boardwalk in Santa Cruz, which has a roller coaster that's been there for, I believe, is it 100 years? And it's still in operation, as far as I know. So that is pretty sick. But they filmed the movie on the boardwalk in Santa Cruz. However, Santa Cruz did not want to be associated with the movie because in the movie, they say the city is the murder capital of the world, which is why they had to change the name, which they didn't really change the name very much. Santa Carla, Santa Cruz. You know what I mean? After the movie came out and they saw what the movie was going to be, they were more willing to allow them to film there. But they still didn't want the name because Santa Cruz had an issue with serial killers in the 70s. They had 3 active serial killers at the same time. They killed about 28 people between 1970 and 1973. They also had a movie filmed there, I believe a horror movie that was filmed on the boardwalk that was very visceral for some people, and so they really did not want to be associated with another horror movie. Luckily, this movie might be a little spoopy, but it's just, it's beautiful, and they warmed up to the idea. The title Lost Boys is based off of Peter Pan's Lost Boys, kids who ran away from home, who stay on an island, live together, and don't really grow up. Originally, this movie was supposed to be a Goonies-style movie. The characters were supposed to be much younger. The Frog Brothers were supposed to be like 8-year-old chubby Boy Scouts. Star was supposed to be a boy. They were all supposed to be like kids, basically Goonies with vampires. However, the director at the time had to step back and decided to work on Lethal Weapon from 1987. Joel Schumacher took the role of being director, and he's like, we ain't doing that shit. So he aged up all the characters and made it more of a grungy teenage film rather than a Goonies with vampires. The Lost Boys was the movie that created the 2 Coreys, which involved Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. They were very popular in the late 80s and 90s, and of course they did their own projects, but a lot of the time they would do stuff together. License to Drive being one of them, which is an awesome movie, by the way, and I highly suggest. It came out a year after The Lost Boys. Oh, great movie. But this was the creation of that. They worked very well together. They had, chemistry. They were really good friends. And eventually they had their own, reality television show in 2007. It had 2 seasons. It was called The 2 Coreys. Sadly, Corey Haim passed away in 2010 at the age of 38, which is just heartbreaking. But Corey Feldman did talk about their relationship. We just clicked. Chemistry for ourselves. I've worked with a lot of great people through the years, and with Corey, you set us in front of a camera and tell us to go, and it just happens. And there's really no explaining that. This fact is, it's a Lost Boys fact, but it's more based on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Joss Whedon, who created Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was inspired by the Lost Boys to create this show. Grungy vampires that went from looking normal to scary. They hid behind a mask of normalcy, and then they're vampires. Spike, his look, his leather jacket, his hair, is based off of David. Now, David from Lost Boys is supposed to look like Billy Joel, so I think he got inspiration from that, and David, and just Spike. Now, obviously, there's a lot of controversy with this show now, because of Joss Whedon and how he handled things. But the show is still a favorite among many people, and it was inspired by my favorite movie. I never finished Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Oh my god. Don't get me wrong, I did like it. However, my problem is a lot of the episodes didn't involve vampires, or they weren't fighting vampires, they were fighting demons and like giant mantises, or like random ass shit, which is fine. It's like a supernatural before supernatural, but it's called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and she kills a lot of other things. So personally, I would have liked to call it Buffy the Slayer or Buffy the Monster Slayer, because I feel like vampire doesn't really fit the title as much as it should. First few seasons it does, and then after that they branch off a lot more, which is fine, but that's a personal opinion. The idea of them looking like monsters and then looking like people, that was in the Lost Boys, and that was very useful for us. You could have somebody fool you, or someone like Angel seem like he's not a vampire, and then he is one. This fact I actually knew from watching the movie 17 times. At the beginning of the movie, when they're showing scenes of the boardwalk, the Lost Boys are walking across the carousel, and they come in reverse of the way they die. Marco comes last, David walks on first, and in the order that they appear, if you reverse it, that's the way they die. Which is just, it's just interesting foreshadowing. Of course, it doesn't have a big impact on the movie. It's just kind of interesting. During the awesome concert scene in the Lost Boys movie with Sexy Sax Man, which I thought I was the only one who called him that. I am not. A lot of other people call him that too. His name is Tim Capello. He's actually a trained musician. He dropped out of school at 15 to join the Conservatory of Music, and has been training with instruments for a very long time. He actually toured with Tina Turner, which, hello, that's pretty fucking awesome. And in the movie, he's playing a saxophone. He's actually trained to play the saxophone. The 2-hour gig became a lasting part of Tim Capello's career, because now most people know him as Sexy Sax Man from Lost Boys. Well, not most. I do. And they actually did a parody of it on SNL. And I believe he has toured since Lost Boys, obviously, and he has performed this song to people. The I Still Believe song, freaking fire. It is an amazing song, and they only do a snippet of it in the movie, but I highly suggest you listen to the whole thing, because it's a bop, man. It is a bop. The most spoken word in this movie is Michael, which in one scene, David just repeatedly keeps going, Michael, Michael. Michael is said 118 times in this movie, and this movie is not super long. They said it 118 times, majority of them from David, but, they go Michael, Mike, Mikey. They said Michael 118 times. So next time you watch, just start counting and see, you'll be like, holy shit. The train bridge scene was filmed on the Iron Horse Trailhead Trestle Bridge, 40 miles north of Los Angeles, off of Interstate 5 on the Magic Mountain Parkway. There is now a walking trail across this bridge, so you can go over there and be like, wow, they filmed a movie here! If you would like. Kiefer Sutherland and a lot of the other Lost Boys did their own stunt work for this movie, which I didn't actually know. There are a few scenes when they're like riding across the sand where they don't really show their faces, which I thought was because other people were riding the bikes for them. It's possible that they did do a few shots with stunt work actors, but it sounds like they did a lot of the riding themselves. However, Kiefer used this skill to impress a girl on the boardwalk. He was riding down the boardwalk, saw a pretty girl, tried to do a wheelie, didn't see a train track, and fell off said bike. He broke his right wrist in 3 different places and had to get a cast, which obviously, when you're doing a movie with vampires, that ain't gonna work. So if you watch, he's wearing gloves, I believe, for the entirety of the movie, if not most of it, because of the cast. Which I did not actually know. I thought he was just it was a fashion choice to wear gloves. But no, it had a purpose. It's because he broke his wrist. Trying to impress a girl, which, why not? The soundtrack for The Lost Boys is one of the most profound. One of the most well-crafted soundtracks to this day. Whoa. No, it's a very well-done soundtrack, and the main theme of the movie, Cry Little Sister, was written for the movie. It really fits the vibe. It's very moody. It's very, gets you in the zone. It's a very great song. It did so well that it got to number 15 on the Billboard 200 in the 1980s. It has been redone as covers, as snippets, over the years many, many times. My favorite one right now is the cover by Vampires Everywhere. Oh, now that's a good one. And I highly suggest you listen to it. Kiefer was reluctant to take the role of David, but when he found out that INXS and Jimmy Barnes were going to be on the soundtrack, it kind of pushed him in the right direction because he loved their music and went, okay, sounds like a plan. Speaking of reluctant stars, Jason Patric, who played Michael, also didn't really want to be in this movie. He was very hesitant about it. It actually took Joel Schumacher 6 weeks of convincing to get him to be in this movie. Every day be like, hey, you want to be in this movie? He'd be like, no. And then he'd call back and be like, hey, you want to be in this movie? And he would continually keep saying no. Jason was still kind of new into the acting scene. He was still unknown in a sense. And Joel wanted him in this movie really badly. He didn't even have a second choice. Like, if Jason had said no and couldn't have convinced him, he didn't have another option. He'd have to go start from scratch and start looking. But he really wanted Jason in this movie. He loved his acting. He loved just his vibe. And he was like, he'd be perfect. Luckily, eventually, Jason agreed to be in it. Jason was reluctant because he thought it would be like another exploitation horror movie. However, eventually once he read through the script and he realized what it was truly about, he accepted. And thank God he did, because Michael basically carries this whole movie. Jason does a fantastic job of playing this character. And if he had said no and just, nah, I don't know what this movie would have been. Obviously, I wouldn't know because someone else would have played him. We wouldn't have gotten this experience. But I am so happy that Jason agreed to be in this movie. This movie turned out to be a giant breakthrough for Jamie Gertz, who plays Star. Originally, Star was supposed to be a beach blonde, but Jason suggested Jamie because he had worked on Solar Babies with her, which is a movie that came out in '86. And he was like, she's really good, and the chemistry they had together was just, it worked well. They worked well together. And so Joel, agreed to Jamie, and here we are. I don't think I could ever imagine Star as a beach blonde girl. Her long, curly brown hair is just iconic. And the idea that she could be a beach blonde girl is just, there's nothing wrong with beach blonde girls. But I'm just saying, it just feels weird. It doesn't feel right. Throughout the movie, there are a few scenes where the Lost Boys are flying. Whether they're pulling people out of cars, ripping doors off of cars, or just, flying at Sam and Michael's house. There are scenes where they're flying, however, you don't see them. There's only 2 shots where you see the vampires flying. They're green screen shots, and they're both in the final fight. One is with Dwayne, when he grabs Sam and picks him up, and the other one is when Michael and David fly at each other. The rest of the shots, when it comes to the flying, you can't see them doing it. And this is because their budget was cut by $2 million, which is rude. Warner Brothers, last minute, decided, I don't know if we should do this, and cut their budget, which is very rude. They had $8.5 million to make this movie, which is not a small amount, but it's not a big amount. So they didn't have as much money for green screen and for other kind of effects that they might have wanted to do. So they had a lot of shots where the vampires are just flying around, but it's just cameras doing it, rather than seeing the Lost Boys flying, which honestly I think worked out well because you still get the vibe across and you still know what's happening. And even though most of it was because of the low budget, I think it worked in their favor. Because of this budget cut, they had to work with what they had, and the art department got hit the hardest because, how are you supposed to make all this stuff for the movie when you don't have the money to do it? So they thought of some ingenious ways to make this movie happen, to make the parts work. One of the things they did is there is a shot in the movie where the vampires are flying through the clouds. That is actually B-roll from Top Gun, which I did not know that. But there was some unused Top Gun B-roll of just, through the sky, and they used it for this movie. So, Lost Boys got a little Top Gun in it. Like many major movie releases, there was a novelization of the movie, which went into more detail and had deleted scenes that were not in the movie, in the book. It is about 220 pages, and it goes into greater detail about, the things that happened within the movie. However, it is not cheap. I cry. I would love to own this book. I would love to fucking read this book, but I googled it, and it's about $200.
What you say? That you only meant well, 'cause you did.
Fright Night also has a novelization of it that I want, but that's also a few $100s. God, why? Don't get me wrong, I really want to read this book, and it's probably really good, and it goes into more details about Michael's garbage picking up job, which was completely cut from the movie, but in deleted scenes you can see him picking up garbage from the beach. There's also the surf Nazis, which they don't really talk about much in the movie either. They go into more detail about that in the book, and I would love to read it, but it's not worth $200 to me. Ugh, god damn it. Lost Boys is a lot milder than a lot of the R-rated horror content of the time. There's only moderate swearing and no nudity at all. The only thing that it had, for horror was its special effects and its, gore and blood. Dwayne blowing up, that was cool. Paul, in the bathtub. Icky, still creeps me out. David getting shanked. Ed blowing up. Max blowing up, I mean. But the one scene that they actually cut down was the scene on the beach where Michael's in that tree and he's watching the Lost Boys kill all these people on the beach. Dragging them around, eating them, throwing them into the campfire and laughing about it. They have some problems. But there's one scene that's cut down quite a bit when David bites into the head of somebody and blood sprays out. It's a quick shot, and then they continue going on with the whole scene. However, the original scene was much longer, where he actually bites a chunk out of this guy's head. Actually rips part of his head out. And they cut it down, and even Kiefer at the time was like, Jesus Christ, that's a little aggressive. Which is probably what the editors thought, and which is why they don't show the whole scene in the movie. I don't know if there's any evidence of this scene, if they ever kept it and they put it on a DVD, or if it's online somewhere. Part of me wants to see that whole scene play out. Because that sounds very interesting. Was just so violent, I couldn't believe that we were doing it. I ate the whole back of a man's head off, and blood just went everywhere. I had been directed to just smile like a child having cake, and the two images were so frightening and scary. In the scene where David's hand catches on fire, he's trying to grab Sam and pull him back into the cave, but the Frog Brothers pull him out just enough so David's hand touches the sun, his hand lights on fire, and he shoots back into the shadows so that they can escape. He's holding his hand, and it's smoking. And while this is happening, there's a close-up of David's face as a tear rolled down his eye. That was not in the script. The contacts from the 80s were absolutely terrible. They were made of, thin glass, I believe, or some material like it, and it dried out people's eyes so fast. They could only have them in for, a minute or two before their eyes started, literally burning. It was terrible. So this shot of him crying was actually his eyes drying out and trying to add moisture back to his eyes, so he cried. And they left it in the movie because, it's a very iconic shot and it works very well, but it wasn't supposed to be there. The shot of the Lost Boys waking up and then flying out of the cave to go get Sam and Michael, if you notice, it is reversed. And that is because they actually forgot to film that scene. From what I remember, because this is a fact that I learned a few years ago, they were editing and went, oh shit, we forgot to film that entire scene. And obviously they didn't have time to go back and refilm it, so instead they reversed a shot from earlier, darkened it a little bit, and then transitioned to a night shot of the boardwalk as they fly over and go find Sam and Michael. It's not really that big a deal, and first time I watched it, I didn't even notice that it was reversed, and then I was like, wait a sec. But yeah, that scene is a scene from earlier, when they're going into the cave, they just reversed it. Each of the Lost Boys die in a different manner, some more gruesome than the last. Marco gets shanked with a wooden stick, his blood sprays everywhere and it's full of glitter. Paul falls into a bathtub of holy water and garlic and then melts. Dwayne gets shot in the chest with an arrow and then is blown up by a stereo, and David is stabbed by some antlers. Max, he blows up. Most of the Lost Boys, very gruesome deaths. However, David Well, his was very calm compared to all the rest. A lot of people believe that this is because it didn't actually kill him. The Lost Boys have to be killed by a wooden stake. Marco was stabbed. I mean, Paul was dumped in holy water, so that's a little different. But Dwayne was shot with an arrow, which I believe was a wooden arrow, shot into a stereo and he blew up. But David was stabbed with antlers, which is not wood. Not wood at all. So if I remember correctly, the director, they planned to do another movie called The Lost Girls, which was fucking sick. I don't know if David was supposed to be in that, but a lot of the theories suggest that he didn't die because he wasn't stabbed with a wooden stake. It was antlers that killed him. And in the comics, because there's 2 comics based on this movie, he does come back. It didn't kill him. Which I do believe would have been awesome for the sequel, because he wasn't killed with a wooden stake, and his death was a lot calmer than the rest, so him living makes a lot of sense. Him escaping, yeah, it could happen. Because technically, he wasn't stabbed with a wooden stake. Just saying. Originally, The Lost Boys was supposed to have an end credit scene, which was very rare back then. Nowadays, it's very common for movies to have an end credit, mid credit, start credit, end scene. In this movie, however, it was supposed to have an end credit scene where we're back at the hotel where they live, and it's a scan shot where it shows a mural with Max wearing a straw hat, looking exactly as he does before he blew up, and he's talking to some boys, which of course would be the Lost Boys. So it's signifying that they are way older than they let on, obviously, and that Max, obviously turned them. We never find out in the movie how old they are, how long they've been vampires. They're just vampires. We never get to find that out. But this mural was kind of like hinting at they've been vampires for quite a bit of time. However, that shot was never filmed, and they never actually added it to the movie, though I would have liked to see it. Lost Boys was one of many teen-friendly horror movies that came out in the 80s that really revitalized the vampire genre, because before this, vampires wore suits and capes, and we're like, I want to suck your blood. But this was different. Vampires weren't counts. They were grungy teenagers. And this movie, plus Near Dark, which came out the same year, which is a little more gruesome than Lost Boys. You got Fright Night, that came out in 85. Fright Night Part 2 in 88. Vamp came out in 86. And a few others really revitalized this genre and made it more teen-friendly rather than an old-ass count, which, don't get me wrong, I love Dracula. Christopher Lee is my man. But who doesn't love some leather-wearing biker vampires? And this movie influenced a lot of media going forward, specifically Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but it influenced the vampire genre for a lot of movies, TV shows, the idea that vampires could be hot but dangerous. Don't get me wrong, the vampires of the past could be hot, but this was more like, I don't know. It really influenced a lot of the media going forward. Now, there are a lot more fun facts that I could have mentioned. Comment down below if you have any fun facts that are your favorite that I didn't talk about. Obviously, I only went over 20. I probably could do 50, 100. I don't know. But I had a really good time. This is my favorite movie of all time, so talking about it at all is just, it makes me happy. That and Fright Night. I could talk about Lost Boys and Fright Night for years, because I love them. I don't know what it is about them. I love them. they're literally, I don't know what it is about them, but they're my favorite. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be back again next week. If you watch Lost Boys, let me know what you think of it. If you've seen it, tell me what your favorite part of the movie is. My favorite part, because I know you care, when Michael gets attacked by Nanook and he's thrown down the stairs, and then Sam walks out and he goes, what'd you do to my dog, you asshole? And then the whole scene with the mirror and Sam running up the stairs, and then Michael floating outside the window, that scene is hilarious, because Michael's holding onto the phone cord, and he's yelling at Sam through the phone, and then Sam's freaking out because his brother is flying. That whole scene is just hilarious and beautifully crafted, and I just love it.
Look at your reflection in the mirror.
You're the creature of the night, Michael.
Just like out of a comic book.
My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Oh, you wait till Mom finds out, buddy. Comment down below what your favorite scene is, what your favorite fun fact is, anything at all. If you don't like Lost Boys, which is totally fine, comment down below why you don't like it, or the reasons behind maybe you disliking it. Alright guys, I will see you next week. Bye!